Hi everyone, today we're going to learn how to factor trinomials. This will be useful for us when we're given an equation of a parabola that is in standard or expanded form and we want to move it into factored form so that we can find the zeros. Let's begin by looking at a trinomial and how it's made up. So in our trinomial we have three terms. There's an x squared plus a b times an x plus a c value. When we want to factor this trinomial, we will know that our factors will be two numbers that multiply to give us the c value, or the last constant value in our trinomial. But those same factors will add together to give us our b value, or the center term's coefficient within our trinomial. Let's look at some examples to see how this makes sense. We can start with -10, know that we need to have two factors that would multiply to give us -10. We'll need to think of all the factors of 10. So we know that 10 can be found by multiplying 1 and 10 together, but there's no way that we could add a 1 and a 10 to come up with a 3, or the center coefficient. We could then look at 2 and 5. And if we explore a 2 and a 5, we can work them so that we will get a 3. We'll need to make the 5 be negative and the 2 be positive, so that when we multiply -5 by 2, we'll get -10, but when we add -5 plus 2, we'll get -3. So these will become our factors. So our trinomial of y equals x squared minus 3x minus 10 will be y equals, and then in brackets, x minus 5, and then another set of brackets, x plus 2. In our second example, we will need factors that will multiply to give us -5 and add to give us +4. If we think about the factors of 5, we know that the only factors we can use to create a 5 is a 1 and a 5. So if we make our 1 be negative and our 5 be positive, then we will have +5 plus -1 equals +4, and +5 times -1 will give us -5. So our factored form will be y equals, and then in brackets, x plus 5, and then in the second set of brackets we'll have x minus 1. In our final example, we will need factors that will multiply to give us 10 and add together to give us -7. Now, in this case, again with the factors of 10, we know that they're going to be 1 and 10, which we can't use in any way to make 7, or 5 and 2. If we make both factors be negative, that will mean that we'll have -5 plus -2, which will give us -7. And because of our integer rules, we'll also know that -5 multiplied by -2 will give us +10. So our factored form for our last trinomial will be y equals, and then in brackets, x minus 5, and then in our second set of brackets, x minus 2. Sometimes there'll be an extra step that we will need to use before we can factor our trinomials. This will be the case if there's a coefficient out front of the x squared. When this happens, we will need to common factor first and then factor the trinomial. So let's look at our first example. Y equals 2x squared plus 10x plus 12. Well, there's a factor of 2 in each one of those terms. If we divide 2 into each one of those terms, we'll have y equals 2, and then outside of our brackets, we'll be left with x squared plus 5x plus 6. Now we can factor this. We'll need numbers that multiply to give us 6 and add to give us 5. 2 and 3 will work here. 2 plus 3 will give us 5, and 2 times 3 will give us 6. So our factored form will be y equals 2, and then in brackets, x plus 2, and then in another set of brackets, x plus 3. In our second example, we can factor a 3 from each of the terms. So we'll put the 3 outside the brackets, and then left inside the brackets will be x squared minus 5x minus 24. Now we can factor what's inside the brackets. We will need two numbers that multiply to give us -24 and add to give us -5. In this case, negative 8 and positive 3 will work. So when we multiply negative 8 times positive 3, we'll get negative 24. But when we add negative 8 plus positive 3, we'll get negative 5. Now we can factor. We'll have our factored form of y equals 3, and then inside the brackets, x minus 8, and then in the other set of brackets, we'll have x plus 3. In our last example, we can factor a 5 from all three terms. So we'll have 5 outside the brackets, and then inside the brackets, we'll be left with x squared minus 6x plus 5. We will need two factors that will multiply to give us positive 5, and we'll add together to give us negative 6. Negative 5 and negative 1 will work. Negative 5 plus negative 1 will give us the negative 6, and negative 5 times negative 1 will multiply to give us positive 5. Our factored form will be y equals 5, and then in brackets x minus 5, and then in the next set of brackets we'll have x minus 1. So that's how we'll factor a trinomial that has a coefficient out in front of the x squared term. We'll common factor first, and then we will factor the trinomial that's left inside the brackets.